Good evening. This is CTV News for Tuesday, March 28th. I'm Patricia Vallone. Thank you for joining us. Well, it is one of the most hotly contested issues of the 2017 General Assembly session. On the one side, bond companies are looking to protect the future of cash bail in Maryland and are among the state's biggest political campaign contributors. The other side, those who want bail reform and say changes are needed to make the system fair for poor defendants. Today, the latter rallied outside of the State House in Annapolis in support of alternative conditions for pretrial release that place cash bail as a last option.
My name is Bryce Owano. I'm from Prince George's County, and I want to say that today, if we just take a small look around, you see a younger generation, you see an older generation, and you see everyone of every color here today. That is because these issues do not identify to one race, but instead the conditions that they are placed in, because we are a result of the environment you put us in.
Those who are in jail simply because they do not have the money to pay for their freedom. That this is what we are here to talk about, and that in Maryland, 70% of all of our defendants who are held pretrial are there not because they are a flight risk or because they are dangerous. They are there because they are poor.
They are charging women $1,000 a month to stay incarcerated. They are charging women for toilet paper. Who does that? If you can't afford.
With the 2017 session set to close on April 10th, several pieces of legislation dealing with the bail bond system hang in the balance as they await action in committee. Meantime, reaction tonight from immigrant rights advocates after the U.S. Attorney General's warning Monday that jurisdictions refusing to abide by immigration law will lose coveted federal grants for state and local law enforcement. Rochelle Metzger is standing by in Hyattsville with more.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the Justice Department will begin withholding federal funds from sanctuary cities that protect undocumented immigrants. I'm here in Hyattsville at the offices of CASA with Executive Director Gustavo Torres. Now, this is something the Trump administration has said it was going to do as a way to enforce immigration laws. When you heard this press conference yesterday with the Attorney General saying that the Justice Department will start clawing back federal funding for jurisdictions that don't cooperate with federal immigration authorities, what did you think?
It's clearly bullying. It's an attack against our communities and the cities who welcome the immigrant community. Maryland is an example of that, but it's not only Maryland. It's 435 different cities around the nation that they consider themselves sanctuary cities, meaning that they welcome the immigrants to their cities.
The General Assembly in Annapolis is considering legislation that Attorney General Sessions specifically referenced during his press conference on Monday, the Maryland Trust Act, which would limit cooperation between local authorities and federal immigration officials. The Attorney General called this policy something that would increase crime and violence in the state of Maryland. What did you think upon hearing that?
I just want to encourage the Attorney General to read the legislation. I mean, the Washington Post has an editorial yesterday about that and said, like, what extraordinary compromise to make sure that we protect everybody right over here in our state, but at the same time, if somebody committed a crime, the police and immigration have all the authorities to detain and deport this person if it's necessary. But it's not only about immigration, immigrants who are undocumented. We speak about the Muslim community. As a part of the legislation, very clearly we denied this administration the possibility to register Muslims who live right over here in Maryland. So I think that is very important that the Attorney General read the legislation that we are going to pass right here in Maryland.
CASA is a place that many people come for help, for resources, reassurance. What are you hearing from people here in the community?
Our community are very scared, very, very concerned because they don't know what is going to happen. But at the same time, they are not paralyzed. They are working really hard. We are going to have a big rally in May 1st, and we expect that it's going to be thousands and thousands of people who are going to be in the street. But no question about that my community is so very afraid about this machine, deportation machine that the Trump administration is putting together.
All right, well, thank you so much. We surely will follow that legislation in Annapolis. Gustavo Torres, Executive Director of CASA. I'm Rochelle Metzger reporting in Hyattsville, and I'm going to shoot it back to you all in the studio.
And as mentioned, plans are in the works for a National Day of Action on May 1st. May Day 2017 events in Washington, D.C. will include a march and parade. Well, House Minority Leader Nicholas Kipke is speaking out against a Maryland sanctuary bill. The measure would bar local and state law enforcement officers from asking people who have been arrested or are crime victims about their citizen status, just as Rochelle Metzger reported. Now, Kipke says the measure, which has already passed in the House, goes too far.
I think it's a shame that Maryland passed a bill that is structured in a way that protects violent criminals who are illegal immigrants. And in passing that, we raised the concern that the federal government might just react. They already said that they would cut funding to states that enacted laws like this. And so, well, as a Marylander who loves this state, it's unfortunate that we're risking losing federal resources. But the policy is unwise. It makes Maryland a place where people are not going to be as safe as they were before.
Now, Kipke says he hopes the measure is voted down in the Senate. Meantime, members of the Hyattsville City Council are poised to vote on legislation that would establish Hyattsville as a sanctuary city for undocumented immigrants. The panel is scheduled to take a preliminary vote on the ordinance on next Monday. The measure also states that the city will not intervene in federal immigration matters.Maryland's 2 senators make it official that they are opposing the president's Supreme Court nominees. Senators Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen today said they would vote against Judge Neil Gorsuch. Now, the Democrats question whether he would be an impartial justice and claim his record favors corporate interests over working Americans. The Republican-controlled Senate is expected to approve Gorsuch over the objections of Democrats.
Good evening. This is CTV News for Tuesday, March 21st. I'm Denise Douglas.
And I'm Patricia Malone. Glad to have you with us tonight. Well, as Republicans and Democrats wage budgetary battles from Capitol Hill to the state capitol in Annapolis, some local officials find themselves in the middle. Seat Pleasant Mayor Eugene Grant is waiting to see how a number of issues, including health care, will play out. Like so many others, he knows the decision over the Affordable Care Act will have a major impact on his community.
For me, as a local elected official representing, almost 5,000 residents, that has a population of 21% of our population are senior citizens, hearing programs like Meals on Wheels being cut is going to adversely affect many of our senior citizens in our community. We also need to make certain that money is appropriated for the regional medical center. We need to make certain that we're standing together and standing strong to ensure that the governor puts as a priority those dollars for our Prince George's Regional Medical Center for Prince George's County residents.
And the American Health Care Bill is scheduled for a vote on the House floor this week.
An emergency bill to create a Metro Safety Oversight Commission makes its way through the General Assembly. The Federal Transit Administration announced in February that it would hold millions in transportation dollars from Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia until the three jurisdictions adopt an interstate compact to supervise safety on the rail system.
This is legislation that all three jurisdictions have to pass: Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. We have two jurisdictions that have already passed it, so Maryland just has to pass the identical bill, and it's working its way through the General Assembly. It's passed the House, and the House bill is now in the Senate. It would basically create a safety oversight board that has more teeth than the old system that we had. And this is something that the federal government has told us that we have to do, or we're going to be at risk of losing federal transportation funds.
A hearing on House Bill 119, which establishes the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission, was heard today in the Senate Finance Committee. Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin has introduced a bill that would close a loophole on campaign contributions from foreign-owned entities. This comes as the FBI confirmed yesterday that it is looking into any connection between President Trump's campaign and the Russian government. Raskin's bill would prevent foreign organizations from pouring cash into the U.S. election simply because they have front firms registered in this country.
Common Cause and other organizations are upset about the Maryland legislature's handling of redistricting reform. A House committee voted down the governor's proposal to end gerrymandering in the state for the second year in a row yesterday, saying it was unconstitutional. Later in the day, a Senate committee passed a somewhat altered version that would create a Mid-Atlantic compact on revamping districts. Reform advocates are not happy with the Senate version.
We're very disappointed in the activity over the last day and a half. What happened is that incredibly strong substantive policy reform that was put forth by a bipartisan commission was killed in the House Rules Committee, and the Senate committee decided to instead move a piece of legislation that arguably will never take effect. So what we've really seen here is politics being put ahead of policy, and Marylanders are the ones who lose out.
The second reading of SB 252 will be heard on the Senate floor tomorrow.